Call to order this regular meeting of the Washington Planning Board for May 10th, 2023. You can follow, please,
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I ask everyone to please turn on your microphone?
We did this first. I should say I forgot the statement of adequate notice, but I will. The legal notice required in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act has been satisfied, and a statement certifying same will be executed. Hold on. Can you just call the roll?
Oh, yes. Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Mr. Barrett,
Here.
Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Mr. Rabbit,
Here.
Ms. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Fine,
Here.
Mr. Warner,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
And I'm Tony Santiago here.
Okay, and our first order of business will be, I'd like to consider the approval of the minutes for two meetings. And first, we have one from January 9th, and I want to commend Sonia for actually going back because we hadn't really decided formally doing the minutes until after that. So she went to the trouble to go back and review the, right, and so I would like to do the January 9th minutes first. Can I have a motion for approval, unless there are any changes or comments?
I'll move to approve. I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. I understand the April 17th minutes need to be amended, changed.
Yes, Mr. Fine. I would like to point out that I have Mr. Quillen as present, but Mr. Quillen was absent at that meeting. So that's my correction.
Okay. Any other corrections or comments on those minutes? We'll have a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And thanks again, Sonia, for a wonderful job. They're very helpful. Okay, we have a couple of resolutions. Or actually one, right?
That's correct.
I'll let Mr. Warner.
Certainly. Actually, the second of the two that we have on the agenda, the solar landscape, is still being reviewed by board professionals and applicants professionals. So we anticipate that'll be ready for adoption next meeting. But the JCP&L resolution, what's the old phrase, deja vu all over again? The board will recall adopting that resolution, as I explained in the email I sent over on Friday. Inadvertently, the second to last draft was distributed to the board and adopted by the board. It did not include some modifications that were requested by the applicant's team and approved of by myself and the other board professionals. So we did send around the updated version to be followed by the red line version to make it a little easier, hopefully. So you can see what those changes were that we should have had the first time around. So hopefully it didn't become any more confusing and perhaps even a little less confusing. Hopefully it's accurately memorializes this time the board's decision back in April, I believe it was. And it was the preliminary and final site plan approval and bulk variance relief for the emergency generators and the utility transformers, as the board will recall.
Any comments on the the real resolution? And I will entertain a motion to approve the resolution. Pass the resolution.
I move that we approve the resolution as changed in the latest update.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Could you call the roll, Sonia?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Rabbit,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So that is it on resolutions.
Right, okay, and we don't have the second one. So we can move on to the public hearings, of which we have one tonight. It's a courtesy hearing, as I understand, from the Little League for some improvements to the Little League field there at Ginty. Can you introduce it for us?
Certainly, I'll tee it up, as they say, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and we do have
No,
applicants.
This is Little League, not T-ball.
Oh, that's a good, boy, it's rare that I provide the straight line and well done, well played, I should say. Yes, this is a courtesy review, subject to section 31 of the MLUL, for capital projects. As the board knows, we do review and recommendation in conjunction with the master plan within 45 days of referral of same for all capital projects by or involving the township. The board's role is strictly recommendatory. And while referrals to the planning board are not applications for development and do not require the giving of notice, we nevertheless go above and beyond and have the notice provided, which it was. I did have an opportunity to review the content of the notice. I found it to be sufficient, found it to be timely served and published, certified mail May 2nd, published May 5th, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So the notice was sufficient, well, and would have conferred jurisdiction had we needed to do the notice, I guess is the best way to say it. But so it was sufficient to notice. And we do have counsel here on behalf of the applicant, as I understand it, Mr. Chairman, but I'll defer back to you.
Okay. Are you ready to present?
We are.
Okay, thank you.
So good evening, members of the board. My name is Jennifer Porter, and as Mr. Warner mentioned, I am the attorney for the applicant MALL, which stands for the Morristown Area American Little League. And we are here tonight in connection with their application for courtesy review in connection with their project to provide a structure. It's 5,650 square feet, open air canopy structure to cover their existing batting cages and associated pitcher warm-up zone. The project is located at Ginty Field, which, as everybody knows, is right outside, right across the street, with the street address of 35 to 47 Woodland Avenue, which is also known on the tax maps as Block 7303, Lot 15. We did provide notice, which Mr. Warner confirmed was adequate to allow the board to proceed, even though technically it's not required in connection with this type of a project. We do have a couple of witnesses to present brief testimony this evening in connection with this application. I'd like to begin with Mr. Fell to my left, who is a representative of MALL, who can tell you all about this great project and kind of what brought us here this evening. After that, I'll turn to Mr. Chanel, who is our site engineer, who will walk you through the site plan just to orient you specifically to the scope of this project as it relates to the overall Ginty Field Recreational Complex. And then we will turn it to Mr. Lyons, who is our project architect, and he'll show you the beautiful structure that we have planned for Ginty Field. So with that, unless the board has any questions for me, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Fell.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I
please do.
may, I'm happy to swear in all three witnesses as well as our board professionals. If all of you will raise your right hand, and do all of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And could you state your name and, well, this is qualifications, I guess, but you're not testifying as a professional here.
My name is Tim Fell. I am here on behalf of the Morristown Area American Little League Board, of which I served as president for 4 years and I've now transitioned into spearheading certain projects such as the batting cages and other significant improvements, not only for our Little League, but for Ginty Complex.
Thank you. Go ahead.
If I may, I have some pictures from spring of 2021 that I'd like to pass around.
If I may, just how many do we have altogether?
One picture, but he made
Oh, several copies of one.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
so
good, thank you.
that's fine. Oh, thank you. A1 will be a picture of.
So this was spring of 2021, when we had a beautiful but yet windy day and a significant tree fell on one of the cages, which you can see the damage it did. This was around 2 to 3 in the afternoon when I got the call. And as I mentioned to our town rec department at the time, that, you know, we're very fortunate that this did not take place at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And the tree that fell down was basically, it destroyed one of the cages, but because of the weight and wiring and how it's all connected, it's really destroyed all 3. It's made the cages haphazard, somewhat dangerous, and we've been trying to work with it. But that's what really spearheaded us looking into redoing the cages in a significant way that will give it, you know, more safety from further accidents such as this. It will also have more longevity. In other words, with a roofed structure or canopied structure, it will protect the surface, the cages themselves from not all elements, obviously, but many of the elements that have wear and tear on the project right now. It would also allow us to use the cages for our players and rec programs in a more significant way. For example, if the fields were unusable due to rain or wet fields, if it were raining prior to that, players could still go down and work in the cages and be protected from weather. And with the roofed structure, we could operate in light rain. And with the lighting that would be inside the structure would also allow us to work a little bit longer into sunset. And I know that's something that will come up maybe later. We're not looking to have our cages operating at 10 p.m. at night, but we are looking to lengthen the usability of our cages maybe into, you know, sunset, a half an hour after sunset, where there's good light and players and kids and coaches can work and continue to use this facility. And the last reason is that this project is going to, in my strong opinion, significantly improve Ginty Complex from an aesthetic standpoint. That area by the cages is beaten with bushes, poison ivy, roots, dead trees. It's really a bit of an eyesore, to be quite frank. And I think this project, with some of the tree removal that was mentioned, and maybe a little, you know, love and tenderness to the ground with some mulching and weeding, would make that area of the Ginty path a much better and safer place for walkers, joggers, bikers, because as it stands right now, frankly, it's a mess. There are limbs and trees and branches on it almost every day. So that's really where we started. It's been a long road, but I just wanted to give you the background.
Great. Are there any questions for Mr. Pell?
Yes.
I have
Ms.
one.
Wilson.
I've been to many baseball games at Ginty Field with grandchildren and children of my friends. So my question is, with these improvements, they're being funded by American. Are they then part of an asset that belongs to you, or are they part of a township asset? I'm not clear on how that's going to work.
The property is owned by the township. The cages are maintained by the nonprofit American League,
Okay.
you know, mall, if you will. Can we use the acronym mall? Do I have to say it out every time?
Please do.
And is the landscaping that you referenced, because it is a little bit of a bramble mix back there,
Yes.
is that landscaping also the responsibility of the nonprofit or the responsibility of the township?
I would believe that the initial part would be the part of the project and would fall under our funding. I would like to think the maintenance of those areas, just like the maintenance of the grass on the fields, would be the responsibility of the township and the maintenance department
Okay.
once it's initially paid for.
Okay. And that's not the case now?
Well, now no one's doing anything there.
No one's doing anything. Okay.
I mean, no one's weeding that or cutting branches down or pruning anything at the
Jim, do you have
present.
a comment?
I'm going to dispute your testimony.
Just in that little area. Everyone
No,
worked very hard there, but just that
Yeah,
area.
the recreation department did take down some dead trees and other, I think they were ash trees. So, they do the, maintenance over there.
They do regular maintenance, okay. Thank you. It's still a bunch of brambles, I will say.
I will report that to recreation. They tend to have their hands full. But, yeah.
And I will defend Linda on that. I've been playing enough tennis over there to see what's over there.
Mr. Chair? if I may?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Fell. I've spent many days over at the batting cage with my son over a number of years. If Mall proceeds with this project, is the funding already in place, or will this be subject to a future capital campaign project?
The funding is, I don't know how to say that. We have a grant from the state that was allotted to us for $100,000. And any extra funding needed for this project is, I can safely say, already in place. Mall has, enough in the bank, if you will, to pay for it.
That's great.
Any other questions? Okay, want to move on to the next witness? Thank you. Oh, I should say, with any board professional questions, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
No questions.
You made your comments.
I shouldn't say they're not doing anything. I know they cut down some trees. Ramble, I'm sorry.
Good thing I was sworn
No
in.
offense taken here. Let's talk to Bill.
Yeah, right.
So our next witness is Mr. Chanel from Dynamic Engineering, who'll be testifying as a professional site engineer. And so, Mr. Chanel, could you please first tell the board your background and qualifications?
Absolutely. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Daniel Chanel. Last name is Sehnal. I am a principal of the firm Dynamic Engineering, located at 245 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey. I have over a decade of experience in the preparation of various site plans for commercial, residential, industrial applications throughout the region. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as several other states. Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I've also acted as a guest lecturer from time to time. I haven't been before your board or in your township in the past. However, I have testified well over 100 times through various boards throughout the state.
Thank you. We'll accept it. Go ahead. Please proceed.
So my exhibit that I have on the board here this evening is sheet 2 that was submitted in conjunction with this application. It's entitled Site Plan, and essentially what it shows is Ginty Field at the corner of Woodland Avenue and Dwyer Lane is at the bottom of the sheet.
Just for quick reference, I apologize for interrupting. We don't need to mark it as an exhibit since it's not a formal hearing, and regardless, it's the actual plan that was submitted more than 10 days in advance. But what's the last revised date, just for record?
Absolutely. This one actually doesn't have a revision on it. It's just dated.
Or original date?
5th.
October
Yes.
5th, 2022. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So as I was mentioning, that this shows the park that's at the corner of Woodland and Dwyer Lane, and the bold black line that's encompassing that park is essentially the property line. We have the police station, which is directly across the street, and the subject of this application is located at the southwestern corner where those existing batting cages are. So under existing conditions, as you heard from Mr. Fell, just chain link fence right now with some netting. The turf inside there is an artificial turf. And you can kind of see the tree line that I have over the top of the proposed structure. And that's the existing tree canopy. There's no trees that are actually in the way of the existing the batting cages. But there are some tree canopy that hangs over. And as you heard from Mr. Fell, there will be some maintenance of the landscaping, removal of some additional trees, I believe they're ash trees, which are doomed anyway. So there will be a little bit of cleanup as well. But under proposed conditions, essentially the footprint of those batting cages will remain unchanged. We're proposing to simply put a structure over the top of it. It'll be an open air canopy, which you'll see in the architectural drawings. It's about 45 feet in width by 135 feet in length. So you're looking at about 5,600 square feet in total, and it'll encompass all 3 of those existing cages that are there. So really, it's not a real major increase in impervious surface coverage. The turf that's there kind of acts as impervious. However, we are adding a roof over the top of it. So we wanted to address stormwater concerns. That roof area will collect some stormwater. We'll have less of an opportunity to infiltrate to the ground. So what we're doing is proposing some gutters along the sides of that canopy itself, which will collect that rainwater, and then we'll pipe it underground directly to an inlet that exists on Dwyer Lane. So it goes directly into the inlet versus spilling out to the ground, causing any puddles or anything like that. We're not proposing any type of dry wells or basins or anything like that. We have 4 soils here, so we're looking at 4 infiltration. So most likely the water wouldn't really seep well into the ground to begin with. So rather than doing that, we're just going to trench directly to a inlet and discharge the water there. And I believe that's essentially the gist of it. I mean, if there's any specific questions on the engineering of the site, the setbacks remain essentially unchanged from the batting cages that are there. You'll still have a nice wooded buffer and that path that walks to the tree portion there to protect us from the neighboring properties. But if you have any specific questions, I certainly make myself available.
Yes.
I thought I heard or read, I don't know if I heard or read, that the surface of the cages are going to be somehow improved. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I believe they'll be replaced with turf. So there'll be new turf within
Inside the cages will be turf? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah. So you, in your presentation, you referred to the batting cages, the canopy covering the batting cages. On the application, I saw where also the warm-up, the pitching warm-up mounds are also going to be covered. Are you referring to both when you say batting cages?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to cover both the batting cages as well as the pitching?
Correct.
Is the outline shown on the site plan map there? Does that include the warm-up, the 2 warm-up mounds and lanes?
Yes, it does.
Okay, because I got a little confused when I was looking at it,
Yeah, I
what
think
was
you'll
covered
see
in what.
The architectural plan a little bit more detailed.
Okay.
See how everything's laid out there and it's spelled out.
Okay.
Just to clarify on the tree removal, you said there's 2, right? And they're both ash trees?
I'm not specifically sure if they're ash. My understanding they may be, which if they are, they're going to be doomed anyway.
Right.
But I believe they were willing to work with the environmental commission that they replace the tree.
How big are they?
When I drove past earlier, I think they're about no more than like 15 inches in diameter. Massive. Decent sized trees. It causes safety concern.
So they're going to be removed anyway.
Right, that's something that's being done by the township in connection with this project.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
And the township has been pretty active in replacing a lot of ash trees with their planting program already. So maybe not formally related to this, but there have been a lot of trees going in to replace a lot of ash trees, street trees that have come out. So, okay. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Oh,
one other question. Just to clarify, there's no plan to add additional lighting, right?
I think the architect will speak to this. We're happy
Oh,
to put
that's
lighting
okay.
underneath the filter here.
Any other
Other
questions?
questions? In the environmental commission report, there was a mention of not covering pitchers mounds. Is that accurate?
No.
Can you speak to that?
It does cover a portion, and that will actually be explained in detail by our architect, the next witness.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No, okay. Thank you very much. Well,
So next, I'd like to call our last witness, Mr. Lyons. And if you could start by giving your background and qualifications to the board.
My name is John Lyons. I'm the architect representing Mall for the project. I'm a principal in the firm Lyons McConnell, located at 27 to Hart Street, right in Morristown. I've been an architect, licensed architect for 15 years. Worked on many projects in the township. This is actually my first time at the planning board. I have been in front of the Board of Adjustment projects, but I have testified to many boards in the area.
And licensed as an architect in the state of New Jersey remains in good standing?
thank you. Continue.
Previous testimony touched on a lot of the information, but there are some things that we can see best on the architectural drawing. So anyway, this is drawing A 1.0, which is the plan for construction. There are a lot of lines. but I want to orient you on what's what. I'm going to start on this side. This is, Woodland Road is here. Wire is on this side. This is when you're coming in from the tennis courts. The lines on your drawing that are lines with the little circles, that's the batting cages. That's the chain link fence for the batting cages. Thank you. If you're coming in from Woodland and the tennis courts here, you'd enter in, this is a double batting cage here, and then this is the single beyond. Some of the questions have come up on the pitching area, that turf area. There's a turf area beyond, as you came with the tennis courts here, as you walk along, there's an open turf area here.
Oh, okay.
On the drawing, it says approximate line of existing turf here. That turf, that's the turf line. It starts at the end of the batting cages, comes up, comes across, and then steps up where at these existing batting cages.
Oh, okay.
Out
Okay.
a little further.
Okay.
Our roof structure is the dark dashed dot line. That's the overhang of the roof. So you can see we're really covering that pitching area outside the single cage completely. We're only covering that same width at the area of the cages that are closer to the tennis courts. That kicks out. We're not covering that last, we'll call it last 5 feet of that turf. They're about, from the cage, it's about 11 feet to the end of the turf that runs along here. We're covering all of that for the full length of the cage. This is, again, the dash dot. This is the overhang, which covers all the cages. And then we have the lines of the turf. Going to our next drawing, which is our elevation drawing. Again, to orient you, this is what you'll see looking at the cages if you were standing in the tennis courts. Looking across, you'll see this is our roof. These are the existing cages. The cages are about 12 feet tall right now out there, about 12 feet tall. This is the roof structure. It's an open structure. There are no walls. It's all just columns supporting the roof. The columns, it's mostly open on the tennis court end, but then the access to the cages. This is a section shot showing the truss structure and then the cages below. And then this is your view if you're on Ginty 3, if you're on the baseball field that's right adjacent to the cages. If you're looking at it, so this is the long length of it. These are your columns. So this is what's holding up the roof. So it's columns holding up the roof, and you're seeing the structure of the cages inside of that. The roof steps down because it is not as wide when you get back to the single cages. So we have a step in the roof, which then I'll move on to the next drawing where you can see that. If you're looking at this from wire, you see the roof steps in. That's where you get that. Again, open structure, the cages inside of it, and then looking at it from the walking path side. This is looking at it from the walking path side. Again, open columns and roof structure. So we did lighting. In terms of lighting, the lighting would all be, so this is going to be an open canopy inside of it. So any lighting would be down lighting inside of that roof structure, lighting the cages, but not throwing light beyond. One of the advantages of having the lighting is in the early spring and late fall, being able to go a little bit past sunset, as Mr. Fall mentioned. But there would be no extra amount of lighting on the structure. Be happy to address any of the questions.
Is there lighting on any of the other buildings that are in the complex there?
Yes. There was a light on the original batting cage that was typically on. I think when the tennis courts
Oh,
were put
okay.
in, that light was somehow turned off and no longer works. The saying was that when you saw the light on, it meant the scoreboard was working.
Oh,
And I think they did a project, they ran some electricity through the parking lot there. I guess it was probably 2 years ago,
Yeah.
2 months ago. Does that sound about right, Jim?
Not involved with that one.
So, anyway, they did a big project, but.
It'd be working if I was involved.
But there was a light and is a light on the batting cage right now by the door.
okay.
And there are some lights on the garage.
All right.
So the lights are not visible from the outside?
The fixtures. You'd be able to see they're shining light down, so you'd be able to see that the cages are lit. There'll be light inside the cage, but there won't be any fixtures outside, shining outside, you would see the light, the direct light of the fixture.
And there'd be little, if any, light spillage beyond the perimeter of the cages themselves, correct?
Correct.
How bright is it? Do you know the lighting? Is it like
I don't have a
sports
calculation.
lighting?
No, it's not sports lighting. It's just typical lighting, LED lighting to light the space. I don't have a foot candle on for it.
Yes.
Yeah,
sir.
I have one question, but in two parts, goes to safety. In terms of the batting cage itself, so you have the canopy, you said what, 12 feet?
The top seated would be about 12,
Okay,
14 to above the structure.
okay. Above the cage itself, is there like a netting so that,
Yes.
fly? Okay,
The balls would still be, just like they are right now, held inside by a net.
right.
This is again just to protect it really from above.
Right. And in case of inclement weather, so you have a bunch of kids congregating by the cage, is there a place that they could safely congregate outside the rain, but not quite inside the cage?
There are about, referring to Plan A 1.0, at the doors of the cage,
Yep.
there is an overhang of about 7 feet. So there's an area there for them to be staying. They're not,
Okay.
it doesn't
So they're
stop right
outside
at
the
chain link.
cage.
There's about 7 feet beyond for an overhang.
Okay,
Yes.
outside of the batting
Outside
area.
of that.
And I would also add, they could also stand on the pitcher's mounds if no one's throwing. So if you were just there for batting,
Yeah,
there is an
okay.
area, if it were raining, for 5 or 6 players to sort of
They're not
wait
dodging line drives is what you're saying.
without, you know, it'd be safe outside the cages, outside the netting, but safe also from the weather.
Got it.
Chairman, one quick question.
Yes.
Will there be hurricane clips on this roof?
Yes, there'd be required.
It's a big sail.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's FEMA. I mean,
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions?
I don't have a question of this witness, but I do have a question that I'd like to have put on the record. I asked it earlier and it was sort of informally discussed
Uh-huh.
about the American and the national leagues and how they're formed now and the accessibility for all the children. Could someone
Yeah.
just speak to that?
Mr. Fell could certainly address that.
So, so your concern is certainly because you obviously, the township is more than just Ginty. That's a good question. Well, the long story and short of it is that Morristown National and Morristown American, for the first year ever, are playing combined. So, for example, the team that I just left on Ginty 1 about an hour ago is made up of, 4 or 5 players from the national side and 4 or 5 players from the American side. So the leagues have made a significant step, sort of moving to what I would call one league and certainly equal access. So for example, right now, many of the national named teams, such as Fairchild and Hillside Hose, and I forget the other national name team, PAG, thank you. They often will practice at Ginty now. And that's the first year that this has happened. And me and Mr. Lyons both coach our boys in the league. And I know that the players and coaches have really enjoyed it. I often see Fairchild's and PAG at Ginty practicing. So it would be universal usage for all Morris Township players.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. Is that being done out of necessity? Registration is down, so we have to combine the two leagues?
I don't, the short answer is that no. The answer is that in all other sports across Morristown and Morris Township, by the time players are in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they're playing together in basketball, soccer, football, lacrosse. So why is baseball not doing the same? So it really was more of a driven by players that want to be together and playing together more so than registration numbers being down. I think over the last 4 years that I was president, our numbers were pretty stable on the American side. I can't speak to the national numbers because I was not privy to them, but our registration numbers were pretty consistent if anything, move it up a little bit too. So
So I assume it's reciprocal. Are there former or Ginty named teams that are practicing and playing over at Burnham Park too?
yes, so Riccardi Brothers is there. My team is there on Wednesday night against William Lloyd, which is also a traditional mall team. So we're playing over on Burnham. So those teams that are those national kids that are on my team have as many games over at Burnham as they do at Ginty.
Any other comments?
I have a
Yeah,
question.
Mr. Cohen.
So other board members are showing much more knowledge of this topic than I have. But so this is a facility that's being built with your funds, but it's on township land. And what is the access that's permitted by other township residents to this facility who are not associated with your league or any of the other leagues that you've been mentioning?
So what's your question? Sorry.
I think is it beyond just the little leaguers? Is that
Suppose I wanted to go hit a baseball in your cage.
100%. The high school kids come down all the time and use it. Our juniors now use it. Our middle schoolers use it. It's a
Not exclusive in any way.
It's not exclusive.
No,
It's open. Is there some reservation system that the recreation department maintains? No.
first come, first serve with sort of a 15-minute understanding that if you're in there with your player and there's someone waiting, that you would do 15 to 20 minutes and then move on.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Oh, my only comment is I think it looks a whole lot better than the chain link fences that are falling down that are over there now. So it covers them. I think you're right. It is a much more attractive look. The other comment I would make is I know there were some comments about the screening, but the opposite side of Ginty Path there is pretty heavily, not really forested, but there's a lot of material there. So I don't really see how this is a big impact on neighbors in any negative way. I think I'd say it's an improvement, if anything. I think so. It looks good to me.
I agree. This is a great addition to the Ginty Park. So.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may, apologize for interrupting, but I think two things we should, one we must do, one perhaps we should do with the discretion of the chair, even though it's technically not a public hearing on an application for development. If the board so desires, the chair certainly has the discretion to open it up for any public question or comment. I don't know if we might have one or two members of the public here.
That's on my list here. So.
Oh, okay.
But I probably should
The
have
other
done it
item
first.
is that we, in my opinion, must do is because it is a referral under section 31A of the MLUL, part of what we should be doing is weighing in with respect to master plan consistency. And we have our expert to my right, Mr. Phillips, already sworn in to advise the board on that.
Let's go with the master plan consistency opinion before we open it to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this one is pretty straightforward. I think the proposal is clearly not inconsistent with the master plan. The property's under an OSGU district classification in the master plan document, and that classification envisions and also permits the underlying use, which is basically recreational facilities and fields. One of the express master plan goals is to preserve and enhance open space and recreational facilities for public enjoyment. And lastly, one of the long-term recommendations, or in fact, I think it's classified as one of the ongoing recommendations in the most recent reexamination of the master plan, is to renovate and upgrade existing park facilities as appropriate, including modernization of neighborhood park facilities. So I think for those reasons, this one's pretty much no-brainer in terms of master plan consistency.
Okay. Any questions about that? Nope. And then I will open up to the public and apologize, but I should have formally let them ask questions first and then comments later, questions of the witnesses and then comments, but I will allow questions or comments at this point. If anyone from the public would like to comment. Yes, step up to the microphone, please. Your name and address.
Sure. Paul Yarish, 40 Woodland Avenue. Thank you all for having this meeting. I want to first say that former coach for many years, loves sports, When I moved to Morris Township, I'm not blind. I knew I lived in an area that had fields, and I love that. My wife loves it. My whole family loves it. So I'm not here to say that I want to shut anything down. I want more kids playing on that field. I live directly across from Ginty Field, and it's hardly ever used. Hardly ever used. Kids are not playing sports as much as they used to. Now the old guy's going to kick in and start giving the old stories how we used to have, 50 teams and, kids couldn't play because there weren't enough teams. So I just want to throw that out there. I love sports. I want the fields to be active. What I'm concerned with is when things happen and when we build these beautiful things or build a pathway or fields, I live there. When they're not maintained or there's not a plan and something happens, mom and dad, well, their kids were playing on those fields 3-4 years ago. They're off at Morristown High School in college. It's not their house. It's not as important to them. It's important to me. I consider that my house. That's my neighborhood. I love it. Other people leave. I think an example of that was when Mr. Fell asked the question about the light. And this wasn't not an exact quote, but it works. I don't know. James, do you know about that? Well, I wasn't involved. That would be working if I was. Those are the type of things that happen when everyone leaves. And that's my concern. Yes, we're going to put a roof over this to protect the children. We should always protect our children. Are we going to put a roof over the entire path? I see a lot of kids walking around that path. There's a lot of trees there. A lot of people walking their dogs and babies. So are we going to present that next month? So that's not a reason to put up a roof. One of my questions is, will there be anyone running a business out of this batting cage to generate funds for the league or for themselves to teach kids how to bat and things like that?
No one from the Morristown American Little League will be running a business out of those cages.
But someone else could.
I'm not
I don't
saying
want to
that.
play a lawyer here.
Right. And the cages are open
I'm not.
access. So are there high schoolers that are down there?
Mm-hmm.
Could they be with a third party, quote unquote, hitting coach?
Mm-hmm.
They could be,
Okay.
but they could also be doing pitching lessons on the fields as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could be doing face-off lessons on the grass
Mm-hmm.
for lacrosse. So, and in a number of our fields, players are down there with third parties looking to improve. And yes, they could have access to the cages to play and get better.
Okay.
But mall and the leagues that participate there, so American and National, will not be running any sort of business through those batting cages whatsoever.
To piggyback off that, I don't believe any business can be run on township property.
Shouldn't,
So,
I agree.
and that's really the end of it.
Correct.
Okay.
And to the sense about the roof being a reason of safety, certainly in a one-time off where that tree fell,
Mm-hmm.
yes, but also the roof will allow greater participation. More kids playing is what we want. And I really believe that the roof will give more access, more consistent access to our players to play, get better. I know your son played baseball. We want our kids hitting and throwing, because if they don't hit and throw, baseball is not as much fun. So we want to give them as much access as we can to improve, get better, and enjoy the game.
And that just kind of ties in what I've already said, that these fields aren't active. So are we building structures? Are we doing things to make it more convenient for parents to just basically make it more convenient for them? And then the town has to maintain them when they move on and move forward. Kids go off to college. It was asked, and I'll ask the question, it wasn't clear to me on, the mall's paying for the structure goes up, a tree falls on it and knocks it down. Who's rebuilding it? Who's paying that cost? Are we paying that cost? Is the mall paying that cost? Who foots that bill?
The batting cages are maintained by the Morristown Little Leagues.
Mm-hmm.
The grass, if you will, is maintained by the township.
So It's not a court of law, like they said. Will you pay for it if it gets knocked down?
The way we are offering to do so right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, like, it
I
got
just
knocked
want to know
down.
who's paying for it.
Yeah,
That's
it
yeah.
got knocked down.
Yeah.
I talked to our rec department. I talked to our insurance person.
Mhm.
It was 100% on us.
Mhm.
The township got rid of the tree, obviously, but then it was on our little league to fix it. And we have fixed it to use it
Mhm.
over the last 18 months. And we're really looking to do something significant to not only use it in a more significant way, but also to enhance the Ginty complex in a significant, long-lasting way,
Mhm.
well beyond our time at Ginty as people.
Mhm. Okay, I appreciate that. And something mentioned the roof with the water and things like that. We have major water issues here. So certainly, I'm sure James is going to address that or has thought about it. So, but that is a concern for citizens in the area. We get floods here, and if anything, we don't need anything to contribute to that. So that's a major concern as well. Lighting is a major concern. We have obnoxious lights over the tennis courts that just turn on 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. We've made phone calls asking the question of how do these turn on? How do they turn off? We've been kind of told that they're on a timer, but why would a timer go off at 1 a.m.? So I have concerns that, and it comes back to the maintenance and when everyone goes home and, I'm still in the neighborhood and things happen and things pop up 1 year, 2 years, 10 years down the road. I plan to be here. So those are my concerns. I think, if it drives more players to be active in the community, I love it. I would love these fields to be active, throughout the daytime on a consistent basis. That would be fantastic. Do I think that this will be a driver of that? No. Just throw that out there as on the record. I hope I'm wrong. I just think it's something that's more convenient for parents. And unfortunately, not a lot of parents and a lot of kids. The parade I see every year, opening day, there's no one there. So I think money could be spent in better areas than a roof over a structure that'll probably be used 10, 20, 30 days a year. So I appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Again, state your name and address.
Hi, my name's Michelle Cullum. I'm at 44 Woodland Avenue, directly across the street from the field also. From your designs, you're saying the batting cages are 12 feet high right now. How tall is that roof? Because from the picture, it looks like it's going to double. And my question for that is, were the people on South Street involved in getting this letter of being informed of this?
Yeah, everyone within 200 feet of the site was given public
Right.
notice.
Because that would be a major
So everyone
distraction
all
for their
on the other
backyards.
side of the path all along South Street, because we took the entire boundary of the complex as the basis for the 200-foot.
Okay, yeah, my letter just had my street on it, so I was just want to make sure. But I'm just curious of how tall it's going to be.
So from the ground to the highest point, which is the peak of the roof, is 26'7".
Wow.
It's 14 feet to the beam underneath that clears the cages, which are 12 feet. And that allows for heavy pitch, getting the water off the roof and getting it out.
Okay, and how close is it going to the current walking path?
So it's going, if you can picture where the cages are now.
Yep.
It's within that zone. So it's not.
It's not going out towards? Because I would think you'd have to clear a whole bunch of trees to get that in.
There are only the two trees we think are in question, the two on that's along the turf side, on the walking path side.
Mhm.
But it doesn't go in past the turf.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to picture it in my head. But I do have absolutely the same concerns as Paul there because, the tennis court lights are very bright. I don't see this is just going to add to it. At night, we've got the pickleball court, and that's a great word for that game, for pick all night. But we obviously have a lot of noise concerned with the pickleball court. I haven't initially called, but hopefully there's a cutoff time, but with those lights being on, if you're really gonna have to do this, and I hope you don't, because there are not enough kids. There's so much more that could be done besides putting a structure up for them, getting more kids involved. You know, opening day this year, I've lived on Woodland Avenue my entire life. It's sad to see how many kids are involved, considering when I was growing up. The Memorial Day parade, when they bring the kids on, they're marching that parade gets smaller and smaller every year. It's a fire truck and a band and maybe 1 or 2 teams. To spend the money on a construction like this and to block the beauty that we have now, I don't see where it's going to bring any value. So I just hope you take that in consideration. I have to live there and see it. I just don't really want to see a big structure. I want to see those trees. I'd rather see the kids playing, running around, having a good time underneath the trees, not underneath the structure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question? I think this would be for Mr. Slate. We do have a lighting ordinance and the time, I believe, is 11 p.m., right?
I thought it was 10 for lighting.
There's 10 in some cases and 11 in other.
I thought that the lights of the tennis court are set to not go on beyond 11, but Bill, are you more?
10 p.m.
Okay.
It's our curfew for all of our lighting. Yeah.
So
There's-
to
if there's
clarify,
any-
the lights are
there's a
supposed to go
local
off at 10.
malfunction, Electrical malfunction, and I will say that if you do experience them, they will sometimes have to be readjusted. But 10 a.m. is our lights out.
And the same for pickleball too?
Pickleball, yeah.
Okay. Well, we have just a courtesy review, so we have no formal approval or denial, means, right?
Correct. The 2 functions or potential functions, the one required is to advise, on referral, reflect whether you concur with Mr. Phillips' advice that this is not inconsistent with the master plan, the proposal, for the reasons stated. The board certainly has the authority to make recommendations along with that. But it is a courtesy review. It is not is not an application for development. It's not subject to approval versus denial or imposed conditions or even the extraction of stipulated 2 conditions.
Any comments along those lines?
We will do a resolution, so you can do a motion second, to find it not inconsistent with the master plan, assuming that's the finding, and to make any recommendations you wish to make.
Are there any suggested recommendations?
I move that we accept up. Jim?
I just want to mention one other thing that I did talk to one of the residents that's to the west on South Street.
Okay.
And, his request was that a, fence go up, that's been discussed over the years. There is a natural buffer there. It's kind of swampy. I did tell him to come in, and express that before the board if he was concerned, but, obviously he's not here this evening, but I did want to make the board aware that I did talk to a resident who did request a fence. There is a natural, buffer there in the winter. It's not evergreen. It does go away, but,
What kind of fence?
he was hoping for some sort of vinyl solid fence.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this based on the fact that it's not inconsistent with the master plan and there's no recommendations from the board.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Is that a roll call or voice vote?
Yeah, we can do a roll call because
Fine,
there
we'll
will
do
be a
roll call.
resolution memorializing
Okay.
the finding and recommendations, if any.
Mr. Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Rabbit,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
Benoit,
Yes.
McQuillan,
Yes.
Yes.
so moved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's gonna,
Yeah, I'm
It's gonna look great.
sympathetic to the kids. It's just-
I just drove by there. It looks full of kids to me. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't-
I walked that path.
Okay, moving on to other matters. Is there a legislative committee report? No, okay. And then we have the outdoor dining ordinance review, which I had forgotten about till you dropped it, but I do recall that in recent, if you remember, we've discussed.
Are we gonna have an intro to the ordinance? I do have a question on 7G.
Yes, he will be discussing it, so that's where we are, but I just wanted to kind of set the stages. So we had talked about the need for this at some of the other occasions that our outdoor dining definitions weren't really clear, so Mr. Phillips there kindly took the
Sure.
effort to look and revise and is proposing this
Yeah.
ordinance further.
So my understanding is that the purpose of discussing this evening is that it's to give the board an overview because this is an issue that's been before the board. My understanding is this ordinance has not yet gone to a first reading
No, I think it is on for first.
for
reading.
like Wednesday. Okay, so we don't have to do master plan consistency. We're formally going to get it, but as a sort of a courtesy to the board, because this is where it kind of emanated, I'll just kind of go through the history, Mr. Chairman. So
Right.
as I mentioned, there've been a number of sort of applications before the board where the issue of outdoor dining has come up. And as you may recall, the current ordinance is silent on outdoor dining other than the existing definition for a drive-in restaurant, which created an issue, as you may recall, with the Dunkin' Donuts application, because they had some desire to do some seating outside. And if you literally read that definition, arguably, it prohibits any, essentially any outdoor seating with regard to food that, would be purchased inside the premises. So what we're proposing first is to amend the drive-in definition in the ordinance. And what we simply are proposing that it mimic the sort of older classic drive-in restaurant definitions, which is sort of the car hop or the Stewart's root beer. And by the way, it's prohibited. The reason I have the definition, it's prohibited in the B11 zone. This is not something that we, as a matter of land use policy, want to encourage, but we basically just wanted to make it clear that that was a definition of a drive-in restaurant, where the existing definition caused the confusion with the Dunkin' Donuts operation, because it would not allow for any food and drink to be basically consumed outside the confines of the building, but on the same building lot. So we're just cleaning it up. There's still an outright prohibition. So that's number one. Secondly, we don't have a definition of a restaurant in the ordinance. So we figured this was the time to put in a definition, and this was vetted by the TCC, that we decided to do a very broad definition that would sort of encompass eating and drinking establishments where at least some of the food is served and consumed within the building. So a restaurant would have to have some of the food served, doesn't have to be table service, but served and consumed within the building, okay? So that is the proposal for the restaurant definition. The next thing this ordinance does is we noticed when we kind of dug into the ordinance that restaurants are actually permitted right now in the OL5 zone, the only OL zone where it's permitted, which was sort of a surprise to us when we dug into the ordinance. And again, the OL5 zone also allows, I think, banks and financial institutions. It's an office zone. There's a minimum 5-acre lot. And if you look at some of the areas which is owned OL5, they're close to residential. Some of these areas are probably going to be ripe for redevelopment. We just thought that as a matter of land use policy, that we would want to encourage restaurants in our main commercial district, which was B11. So as part of this ordinance, we would basically eliminate restaurants from OL5 for that logic. And then lastly, we are proposing to basically add outdoor dining as a permitted accessory use to a restaurant in the B11 zone, subject to a series of standards, and they would be bulk standards. The reason we've set them up as bulk standards as opposed to conditional use standards is that we want the planning board to retain jurisdiction if someone comes in with a outdoor dining and doesn't meet one of the standards. We think it's best reviewed at the planning board rather than the zoning board level. So we've not set it up as a conditional use standard, just a bulk standard. And there are a series of, I think, 8 or 9 standards in that draft ordinance. And where they came from, to be quite candid, is my office has done a number of outdoor dining ordinances in other communities in New Jersey. And also we had input from all members of the TCC, including Jim and Steve, and also Rich Aller, who's zoning board counsel. And these were, I think there are 8 or 9. These were sort of the standards that we thought were most appropriate for outdoor dining. And those are the standards before you. I'd be happy to kind of go through them, but that's basically, Mr. Chairman, the genesis and logic as to, why we've drafted this and where we're at this point.
Any questions?
I have one.
Yeah, you started out. Go ahead.
My question is specific to 7G, where it says outdoor dining shall not be located within a rear yard. So I can't immediately think of a restaurant that has a rear yard space for outdoor dining, but if we did have one where that existed, I'm not sure I would want to prohibit having rear yard outdoor dining. I know that when you think about driving down Speedwell Avenue, everybody's in the front yard and whatnot, but to prohibit that, I think, to me, it doesn't, we might find situations where we want the outdoor dining in the back.
Yeah, we grapple with that.
Yeah.
Linda, and I assume you can understand the logic. The logic is most of the B11 zones back up directly to single family residential. So, but you're right. I mean, and there are probably some cases where the rear yard would not make sense, where you don't have a lot of depth and you're putting that outdoor dining right on somebody's, either side or rear lot.
You've also added the 50 feet from residential. So that's a safety net.
Yeah.
But if someone did have a establishment where there was room for a beautiful outdoor dining area, I wouldn't want to prohibit that, I don't think.
Or a side yard.
Is that better in that case, in the general case, is it better for that to be looked at as a variance and decide on whether it's an appropriate place
Well,
to
you
do
certainly
it? Rather-
could tackle it that way, but
Because
someone
if you
reading
allow it, then you can't-
reading our ordinance says no rear yard, they're going to say, we're not even going to, maybe they won't even
Right,
submit.
but if you don't have that in there and somebody wants to put it in the back and it's in an inappropriate place, there's nothing you can do about it. As long as it's in the back and 50 feet from the property line and, you still.
Well,
there's nothing.
if you have the protections that you would normally have, which is the setbacks and the buffering
Right.
and the yada, 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 that's the only item in here that caused me a little concern.
Yeah, and we grapple with that, and I think the chairman raised the real issue. You plan for the exception or the rule kind of a thing. And I just personally, I'm not averse to allowing it so long as we've got certainly that 50-foot residential zone buffer standard. Maybe you can throw something in there on, like, it's got to be buffered with vegetation or something to the residential. Maybe
I'm
we
still
can do something
concerned
like
with
that.
50 feet because
That seems like
all of a
nothing.
sudden 50 feet doesn't seem like much when you got
Outdoor
loud outdoor
dining.
dining.
What's the width-
kind of
what's the
like
width of
50
this
feet away
room?
from your house
Yeah.
or your yard.
What's the width of this room? Is this 50 feet wide or 45 or
40.
No, I'll say 40.
40, 45.
yeah, 50 is nothing. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the one thing I thought was 50
Yeah.
seemed inadequate to me.
That's certainly more than.
I mean, the other thing to consider, what we're balancing here is that many of the properties in B11 are, depending upon whether it's Speedwell or Madison, they're not that large and they're not that deep. So you're trying to weigh all these equities and come up with something that makes the most sense to afford the public protection, but also allow for this use, which we want to encourage. So it's one of these,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, like I said, nothing comes to mind right away that would have a backyard opportunity for seating
Yeah.
anyway, but
Our logic was just all else being equal, that it backed up to residential, it'd probably be better to exclude it. And if there were a particular circumstance that there's a restaurant, it seemed to make sense, and someone would come in for the variance, and they'd have to meet the standard of negative
and they would have
criteria.
to discuss it with the TCC in advance anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I mean, we're all open to suggestions. That's why we're here. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I remember we talked about this, I don't know, a year or two ago. And part of what I remember is the distinction between drive-in and drive-through. And
Yeah.
I don't think I see drive-through in
So
here.
it's still there.
It's
Is it?
so drive-through is the reason it's not in this ordinance change is not affected by the ordinance change.
Okay.
But Kathy, drive-through right now is prohibited in B11. And there's a drive-through definition that we put in place 2-3 years ago, which basically precludes drive-through window service. So those protections still exist.
Okay, good. I didn't look back. At
Yeah,
these.
yeah, yeah,
This is,
yeah.
this is just the changes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question on E,
Mhm.
no signs shall be permitted within the outdoor dining area.
Yep.
Sign seems like a rather broad word. Let's say that somebody wanted to put, a sandwich board out there with today's menu and whatnot, that's a sign.
Well, I'm laughing, Bud, because that came up.
Well, I brought
That
it
came
up- I
up at
brought
the
it up in email.
TCC and we weighed it, and it's like, should we put in an exception for like a special menu board? And I was like, don't complicate it. It's kind of where we're at. But it's a good point, and maybe we want to accept it. But what we didn't want to do is, have a lot of
A big
signage
sign,
and yeah,
right.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, how would that affect, say, Sandy Soul Bites? Because their
Sandy's
front
closed,
sign
isn't it?
is in the
Or they're
middle
closing?
of their
Just approve them.
their
Oh, it's approved. It
application.
was somebody
We
else's
approved, their
call.
front sign is right in the middle of where they're gonna have outdoor dining, or it's right, it seems like it.
Yeah, I think that on their signage, were they reusing existing signs? I
It's
think.
the
No,
same-
they
it's
were using the
exactly
same
the
sign, but
place.
a
It's
new
a new
sign.
sign, but
Yeah.
it's exactly the same place.
But it's in the middle of their outdoor dining.
Right.
area.
Yeah, where it had been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
It's a pre-existing non-conforming.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm just
They have the
just
right to-
curious.
They'd have the right to do it under this ordinance. It's a pre-existing.
Well, but they were taking the sign down and putting in
You're
a
right,
new one.
you're Right, it wasn't.
If
Yeah,
it comes
you're
down,
right.
it's
It was
no
the same
longer
location,
pre-existing.
but it was
You're
not
right.
the same
I
sign.
think we did grant.
And the
variance
dimensions were a
for it,
little different.
Because it's a
Right.
little different, but I just.
They beat the ordinance.
But,
Well,
you know,
I
and
do
again,
think
you
we
gotta
need to think
weigh
about
this
that,
as
though.
reasonable variance
Right.
relief. If that seemed to be the logical place to put the sign, whatever, but we
You're
didn't
right.
want sign clutter in the dining area.
No, when you explain it that way, I think that's right. You just don't want all the other
Do we
stuff.
want to carve out something for a menu board or?
That came up, so I mean, what do you think?
It just seemed like it was getting too complicated.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
like, I think if there's a sandwich board, we're not gonna.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone's shops.
Because someone's not going to
Portable
need a
case,
variance to put a
not
little,
a Permanent thing.
put a menu, okay.
You know what we could do? No identification sign.
What does that
Well,
mean?
then Sandy Soul Bites is,
Well, but that's, I mean, we
Yeah, but that's
granted
gonna be
that,
probably
and,
granted,
everybody comes
we-
in and
and we
these
did, but
cases
I mean-
weighed on
we
the
would have,
merits.
maybe.
And if we put an identification sign, then that wouldn't preclude, let's say, a special menu board
Right.
kind of a thing.
Right.
Maybe we do that.
Identification.
Or a directional sign or a,
A business-
post
Meaning of the
for
business.
seating.
A business identification sign?
Be the name of the restaurant. Like theirs is in the middle of their dining area.
Mr. Chair, I just got one
Yes,
quick
Mr.
question.
Yeah.
So 7C, why the blanket prohibition against amplified music or entertainment? And the reason I'm asking is, one of our favorite restaurants is Provisi, and 2 months out of the year when the weather is ideal, they have live music, a singer outside and sitting outside and glass of wine.
The straight answer was what I said before. If you look at our B11 zone, it essentially backs up to residential, in, I think, all instances. And they're not large properties with deep, areas between where the restaurant and the outdoor seating would be and the residential. And we wanted to afford that protection. I mean, it's as simple as
But
that.
it'd be in the front though, right? I mean, we talked
Yeah,
about.
but
the
that,
sitting in the
but
back.
the music, the amplified music can be, potentially loud because the neighbors are close, but I mean, I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, or Jim or Steve. I mean,
I was the one who got the amplified in there. In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
the original draft said no music or entertainment, and I said, well, maybe it's okay
Okay.
to say
So
none.
if the
Maybe
soloist is using a
Exactly.
amp.
Yeah.
right.
So somebody could put a TV out there and just using the TV's speaker system would be allowed.
You could have
because
a
it's not amplified.
speaker with soft music, but you can't have like a band.
Okay, well, that's
Right.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they usually consider the speaker, I'm sorry, the music from the inside flowing outside not to be amplified.
Right.
Yeah, the plugged-in band.
I got you. Okay.
When Dylan went
And-
electric.
So Dylan can go with his acoustic.
So far, we're good. Acoustic guitarist, it's fine, probably.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes. Oh, the
Um,
acoustic is fine under this.
On the outdoor dining, can we say something about it needs to be wait service and not disposable dishes and stuff? Needs to be,
That's the,
controlled by the restaurant.
well, I think we want to have provision for people to be able to eat outdoors without necessarily being served.
I don't know
under
about that.
broad definition of.
I'm not sure I want that. We have it with Dunkin' Donuts. I'm just afraid it's gonna be a problem. If
No,
we
we
say it
don't
needs,
have that with Dunkin'. They can't.
they can sit outside and.
No.
No,
No
No
outdoor
outside under the existing ordinance.
no.
They were prohibited,
This would let them do it outside, but they would not have table service, obviously, at Dunkin' Donuts. But customers could go and enjoy the outdoors at a seating area.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Don't we have that now for Dunkin' Donuts? They can go outside and eat?
It wasn't allowed, based on the
Okay.
current drive-in definition.
So, because I remember being concerned about the garbage going all over the place, that means they were outside. But maybe they're taking it outside once they eat it. But I tend to think that we should be concerned about letting people just go outside and with plastic forks and knives and paper plates. And I'd really rather see wait service with real utensils and plates. I don't know how other board members feel about that, but
Don't we have an ordinance for single-use plastics, a ban on single-use plastics?
State does.
The state does. So I don't know if plastic forks and knives would be allowed anyway.
The restaurant's really gonna police that too. I mean, if it's like a sty, is someone gonna be eating there? I
Well,
think
there's also
that's-
maintenance stuff, because there's code provision with respect to maintenance. I know certain, there's an argument, you don't want to facilitate the problem and hope that the maintenance, is enforced, but there's maintenance codes. This is more towards the use and the bulk standards associated with the use, in my opinion. Ultimately, it's for the governing body to make the decision from a policy perspective, but as opposed to, well, what happens if, people don't adhere to maintenance codes?
so under this, the way it's written, if someone opened up a Jersey Mike's someplace, they could go in and buy a sub and a soda and a plastic.
So long as there were seating for people to also consume in the
Inside
building that
and
met a
outside.
restaurant. They can't just go in and buy out.
Right, but say they decide, I'm not going to sit inside, I'm going to sit outside. So they'd be able to sit outside.
Look at it as a, and I'm not, a Starbucks, a current Starbucks, you could buy inside and just take it. You buy inside and eat and sit inside. And some of them have provision for outdoor seating on beautiful days to go out and enjoy their coffee and their Danish.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing, but
Right,
that's just
sure.
my opinion.
We have that on Hanover.
I understand your concern with the garbage. That came up. That is a concern. But as far as outdoor dining, I'm in favor of letting them eat outside,
Yeah.
even if it's takeout, sort of.
Okay.
You would think that the restaurant would have
The
proper
restaurant needs to
receptacles.
deal with the garbage.
Right,
Well,
the
you know,
receptacles for recycle or trash.
There certainly is any number of places in Morristown.
Oh, yeah.
Smart World and everything else that, there are a lot that have table service outside, but there are many that are, like you say, the Starbucks that sort of inside, but go outside.
Yeah, I don't really consider that a restaurant. It's just a coffee shop.
It meets the
But it would
definition
I
of
guess most
restaurant.
restaurants
Definition,
would have.
Yeah.
I have one question so we're taking restaurants as a permitted use out of OL5.
Yes.
And is Rod's is OL5, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I have to double check this, Kathy, but Rod's, because it's sort of connected to the hotel, there may be provision in the hotel that allows either a restaurant or some kind of eating and drinking. And, I believe Rod's is actually physically connected to
It's
the
physically
Madison
connected,
Hotel.
yes.
It's not a separate freestanding, correct?
The courtyard that they would normally serve is in the middle of the
Yeah.
actual.
What I think
outside.
the whole point of it, Kathy, was I don't think we want to promote sort of freestanding restaurants in OL5.
Yeah.
And like there's Governor Morris Inn is an OL5. There's a restaurant there's been a
In the
restaurant as
hotel.
part of
Right.
that forever, as far as
Yeah,
I know.
right.
Or not forever.
Morale. It's good.
That's fine with a hotel, but I don't think we want freestanding in OL5.
Okay.
We want to concentrate them in our business district.
Along those same lines, because you've stricken that part from the OL5. But then in the OL15, section 23, it says all permitted uses except for restaurants. Except, I can't remember the actual wording.
Yep.
Restaurants and drive-in restaurants, but the part that you've stricken out of OL5 also allows financial institutions.
Yeah.
So you're saying we should
Yeah,
not allow
I mean,
financial institutions in OL5 also?
Well, the issue is, do we want to encourage, and not there's been a market for this with what's
Okay.
happening in the banking industry,
Yeah.
but do we want to encourage a freestanding bank on a 5+ acre
Yeah.
site? It's almost a better use as part of B11.
Yeah, okay.
But, I'm not averse to keeping.
No, I just was wondering if it was an
That's a good
oversight
point.
or if
We
you brought it
thought
up.
about that,
Okay,
yeah.
right, okay. That's, I know.
Yep.
I think that's probably right.
It's funny you'd say that because my initial reaction is, no, we don't want to allow that. But when you think about the size of the property that the Provident is on and the other banks along Madison Avenue, it was a good thing because they're not being expanded into huge buildings. Visually, the daycare that's going in, and they're not going to be building huge buildings now because you have one building on a big lot. So it's preserving the landscape that's
Here's
been
the
there.
counter to that, Ed. You're not wrong, but the counter to that is, let's take, by example, 2 OL5 properties, the Crum and Foster, and then next to it is the office building on the corner of Old Glen that just went through a couple of applications and got converted to, I think Atlantic Health was the last application. I think to the extent that we can, and we know the office market is difficult and challenging, but to the extent we can, I think that we don't want to have someone come in and chop those properties up to be able to do sort of a restaurant or a small bank, which the current ordinances allows you to do. Because as I recall, the current ordinance for restaurants allows you to do that on a restaurant, on a B11 zone lot, as opposed to a 5-acre lot. So I don't think you want to sort of have someone come in and potentially carve it up at this point.
No, I
Even
agree
though
with you.
God knows what the state of the office market's going to be
Yeah.
like, and it may come to that at some point, but I'm not sure we're there yet. But
I
I
agree with
think
you. I
it
think we've
reads
been
something
lucky.
about you could do it under the B11 standards, Jim, right? In the OL5,
On the,
on the restaurant, there's,
I'm just looking at that now.
it's the last one.
Restaurants other than drive-in restaurants and financial institutions subject to controls established in the B11 zone are permitted uses,
Subject to standards.
subject to
Yeah.
standards in the
Yeah,
B11
okay, so
zone.
I was right. Yep.
So what does this do? This is coming to the township committee on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think the idea of you discussing it before first reading consistency was that the genesis of this came out of applications before the board. So sort of a matter of courtesy. We wanted the board to kind of get a bite at it before, in the case there was anything in here that we didn't want to go to a first reading or there was a significant change, rather than have it come to you for consistency. And then also, by the way, we want this change and then you got to go to first reading all over again.
That was a good idea.
So that was the logic.
Appreciate it.
Tonight's courtesy review night.
It's
Yeah,
courtesy.
that's right.
It's your courtesy.
This is a first.
Well, wait a minute, Jimmy hasn't insulted
We're
him
only gonna
yet.
have themed planning board meetings.
Should we
Theme
use
nights.
the term night sky lighting rather than just exterior lighting?
Where are we?
I'm looking at D, 7D. In our ordinance, we begin to say things should be night sky lighting.
Yeah, that was also discussed, and I think, as I recall,
Dark
you guys
sky.
correct me, because we talked about the dark sky lighting, but we kind of said this is something that we should be doing generically
Yeah.
in the town, not just zone specific. And then it's why are you only doing it in this zone?
Right.
Right.
Can I ask a question about that? That has been an interest of mine ever since the Red Bulls thing and learning about the dark sky lighting standards and all that. And I would really like to see us as the township do either a resolution or an ordinance on lighting standards by, sooner
Dark
than
sky.
later.
It's coming.
What?
I don't know if you noticed the lights were flashing as you.
I did. I noticed that.
We're about
Yes,
to go
I
into the
did.
dark.
What's going on there?
Kathy, Jim is going to
JCP
probably
and
give me a
get our
dirty look or
generator
hit me,
going.
but I kind of agree with you. And Jim, we've had this, our lighting standards, we really should clean those up and kind of bring them up to speed. And it's more you than me on lighting. I mean, I'll weigh in, but I don't disagree with you.
Well, so my question is, you work with a lot of different towns. Are there other, I couldn't find any. I didn't do an exhaustive search, but
Yeah, some, what's that? Some
It's
some
a
towns.
sound.
They do that at the bar to tell you to go home,
Yeah, that's right.
time, right?
Sonya's got a foot pedal over there. Like, time to cut this conversation.
I'd say the majority of the towns that I'm involved in, either working in or advising the town, have probably not updated the lighting standards, but some have. But it's probably, not the majority, but we should I think we should look into it.
I definitely think it's worth looking into.
Jim gonna give me a dirty
Part
look?
of the new master
Well, I'll
plan.
start researching it.
Make it part of the new master plan.
Yeah, really. That's a
Well,
good idea.
That's going on the list.
The
No, we'll start
massive
looking
list.
at that.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
I mean, is there interest? I mean, one of the functions of the planning board is to collect data and whatever to help aid these things. Or would it be any of use, if they could, want to do some research and point you in areas that give you a place to look? Would that be of any help, Jim, from any planning board members?
Not right now.
Okay.
Just want to hear from us.
I would just say, when I was looking at the Dark Sky Association website, I thought they're just standards for responsible outdoor lighting, just the 5 standards. I thought it was really good. And it kind of reminded me of the do not plant resolution. Like if we had these standards in as, we encourage you to do this, one was useful, one was targeted, whatever. There were 5 basic understandable standards. And I felt they provided a good framework for discussion when an application comes up, to get, that you could encourage the applicant to comply as a condition of approval.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. I want to have Dave look at it too, because he deals a lot with, on the zoning perspective, lights and glare. And I
Yeah.
think our ordinance, it's like all over the place,
Yes.
like there's different sections of the ordinance
Yeah, I think
that
I
talk about that.
recall
So we
him
kind of
in
need
one
to
of our
like look at
meetings.
all
Clean
that and
everything
kind of
up.
rein it
Doesn't
in.
have
So
to
I'm going to start with him on
How
that,
about
but
that?
I'll look at that dark sky stuff and, just try and keep it simple and as basic as possible to,
Well,
you just don't want
that
to
to
have
me was
glare.
step 1, just those basic standards. Then the next step after that got more technical with wattage and, the fixtures, and they have to be dark sky. And, that was, to me, was like the next step. And for me personally, I'd be happy with the basic,
Yeah, I think we just need, basic, and so
basic
let me
principles.
work on that. And I'll talk to Dave and start researching where it's all throughout our ordinance and try and rein it in.
So can I just summarize what I think where we are on this?
Yes, go ahead.
We've gotten a courtesy review before it goes to the committee for first read, but we're not really, I mean, we've raised a couple of issues for consideration that were also raised in the development of the ordinance, but we're not recommending any changes at this point. Is that my understanding?
That's a reasonable summary in my mind, yes.
Okay.
So the-
Just making sure we're all on the same page.
No resolution, but I thank you nonetheless.
No, it was very good.
I could be your second.
Let the record reflect, you could probably be my first, but I'm not giving it up.
So that's really the only action we need to take. That's the sense of the board, right? Is that she summed up? Okay, thank you. Very well done. Now the final item on the agenda was the master plan discussion, and I don't want to take this too long, but this came out of our discussion on the meeting of February 6th. Where we talked about, moving forward and what we might want to do, recognizing that the next master plan reexamination is due 2027, which is really only 4 years away. We're about halfway through the last one. But there's, there was some thought and some comments that we wanted to be a little more, possibly, more proactive and less reactive in terms of where we would like to see it go, recognizing that there's no money in the budget right now to doing anything concrete, but just kind of think about what, as a planning board, we might want to see addressed and how it might look. And also what the role of the planning board is and should be. And I lean on on Linda Murphy there first, because she's been on the planning board for the last 2, I believe, right? So has some thoughts, maybe has some
2007,
thoughts about how it went and what we might want to do. I know there was some discussion in the February 6th meeting, just on a really broad scale. Do we want to see another re-examination, or do we think the whole thing should be redone? That's like a major task to do that, and the mechanism for there. So, we're not going to do that tonight, certainly, but whatever decision, whatever direction we want to go, I think it requires, or certainly is incumbent on us as a planning board, to really understand what's there, what the process is. And I know some of us have spent a fair amount of time recently, again, looking at the master plan. But it's not just the 2017 version you have to look at. You have to look at the 2007 and the other ones leading up to it to realize how it's evolved, because it's still based on, was it 1994?
1994.
There are other things that have come up, and there's the MLUL itself, and it's, what it prescribes for a master plan and understanding the requirements, and there, I can't remember how many elements we have now, but there are many more that could be there, and what's involved if we want to put those in there. And then there are things like the whole affordable housing issues that are coming up and will come up in the meantime, that, may or how they're going to be affected, the zoning and the planning and all of that. So my recommendation, my request is to everyone go take a look at the versions of the master plan and the 2020 amended fair housing settlement. I think that was 2018, but the most recent final amendment one was 2020, I believe, there. And master plan, that, and the MLUL. There's the at least when I took the training for the planning board, there is sections in there that they've extracted from the MLUL on what the role of the planning board is and what the master plan requires. So those are other things to review and think about.
What came after MLUL? I didn't hear. You said the master plan, the affordable housing settlement, and the MLUL, and
no, it was the MLUL. I'm just saying, and that's rather than trying to wade through and find all the specific parts, part of the package that at least I got in the training for that we're supposed to take. There is some very nice sections where they've extracted the relevant parts of the MLUL in one place. So that was whatever that.
And if we were to redo the
planning official study guide, there's some pages in there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we should look at too, right? Because I don't think that the MLUL has changed and there are more required sections than there were. Is that right?
Climate now, for
Yeah, they're-
anything new that, well, Paul
No,
could
no,
say it
go
better.
ahead,
So we,
There's at least one, well, actually, electric vehicle too, or no? The
Well, the
climate,
big one's the climate and
climate.
resiliency.
resiliency change.
And-
So
and-
any change you make now, be it a master plan element adopted, a full-blown master plan, or even a master plan re-examination report, I believe, triggers you to do that new climate and resiliency.
Certainly, if you do,
Okay.
if you do any amendment to the land use element, that triggers the climate and resiliency. You have to do it if you do a land use.
Even
plan.
amendment.
Even an amendment.
Oh, but maybe not a master plan re-exam?
No, look, we've been debating this and it's not been adjudicated anywhere, but I've taken the position, and I know some of my colleagues have, that if you're literally and you look at the wording in the MLUL, if you're doing any updates to the land use element, either completely new or an amendment, I believe you've got to do the climate and resiliency. If you do a re-exam and you say we don't need any change in the land use element, I don't think you're required to do it. That's how I read it.
Wow.
But, and I'm sure there's a difference of opinion, but that's how I read it. I know I have other colleagues that agree with that because I run it by them.
So can I
And
ask,
colleagues, both other planners and other land use attorneys, but you know.
I'd like to ask our professionals a question. So our last full-blown master plan was 1994. And since then, in regular cycles, we've been doing master plan reviews and, making revisions and whatnot. And to the point earlier, to really get the full picture, you pretty much have to read everything to figure out how the piece parts ultimately fit together. There are a series of master plan elements. I don't know how many off the top of my head. So climate and sustainability may be one. I know circulation and, there's a whole laundry list
There's
of
like
those.
15 of them.
Right. So I guess my feeling is rather than having us continually have to refer back to a 33-year-old document from 1994, it would behoove us at some point to pull all that stuff together in a complete master plan review and get a new document on the table from which we then would do subsequent amendments going forward. Otherwise, it just gets more and more complex to try to figure out how all the piece parts fit together. And when you're looking at something, do you have a comprehensive view or did you miss something or leave something out? I just think it makes sense for us to do that. And we have time to take the luxury of time for planning. I guess that's what I was describing the other day. Not, the normal process is largely supported by our professionals or a hired gun if we decide to hire somebody on the outside. Although I don't know that we would necessarily need to do that. Paul, you're perfectly familiar with what we've got going on here and have been part of this for a long time. So I'm just thinking if we lay out when we need it done, which is 2027, and then start backing up on things that we could do in terms of preparing ourselves and maybe even parsing some of the elements out and doing them along the way, as opposed to waiting until the drop dead date to have everything done. I think we could do this in a way that wouldn't necessarily incur a lot of cost. It might incur more cost because you're doing it in piece parts. I don't know, but
Can I build on that?
Well, I'm just thinking all of us have to play a role though. So that means we all have to read the stuff.
Yep.
We all have to be able to comment on it. We all have to try to figure out how the piece parts come together. And then with the advice and counsel of our professionals, we knit it into what the new master plan looks like. So, but I'm thinking that maybe we don't do it the way we've always done it in the past. Maybe we do it a different way. And we can get the ball rolling maybe a year or two ahead of 2027.
That you should, if you're going to do either a full blown or you're going to update a significant number of elements, you really need a lot of time to.
That's what I'm
You
thinking.
can't wait until 2027.
That's what I'm thinking.
What I'm thinking, I'm just thinking out loud as we sit here, we're going to be confronted with the next round of affordable housing in the you know,
2025.
the summer of 2025, and who knows what that's going to be. It's going to be grief no matter what. But I think perhaps we kind of address that, and maybe toward the latter part of 2025, we start to think about seriously the master plan. And I think you're right. I think the board members have to do their homework, unfortunately, and go back and look at all the documents from 1994 forward.
Yep.
Look at the elements, look at the reexaminations, how they dealt with the elements. And, you know, you just may feel, and I also get it's a budget issue. I've
Right.
said this before, to do this right, and I know there's a difference of opinion, and it doesn't matter whether I'm doing it or you're hiring somebody else and I'm staying as township planner and being part of the review. It's going to cost six figures to do a complete thing. It's just going to, and you have to
What
be
is this?
prepared for it, and you have to kind of budget for it.
Oh.
So,
I wanted to, can I comment on that? I've heard discussion of wanting to do a complete do-over earlier than 27. And part of what has been, that I've been advocating is, you know, the piece by piece that you were talking about. And to me, one element that I would like to see included in the next master plan is sustainability, a sustainability element. And there is like a subcommittee on the Environmental Commission that's looking into that and seeing what other towns do. There's lots of examples. And there are examples where the sustainability element itself is 50 pages long.
oh yeah,
You know, because that's a big element. There's a lot of moving parts in that. And just doing that element in itself is, and you know,
and a number of towns have done just that. And you're right, they're 40 to 50 page documents in and of themselves.
they are.
Yeah.
And if you read the documents, there's certain topics that we've done stuff on, others we had. So there's I feel like the Environmental Commission has something to contribute there, maybe not writing it, but doing research and gathering information that would be very helpful
Yeah.
in creating that element.
Yeah,
And I
it's-
could see that taking a year in itself, just
Yeah.
for whatever they're doing.
Well, it costs us nothing to do our homework.
Yeah.
So it just means you just have to start reading.
Quick question is the sustainability element that Kathy's talking about, is that part of the resiliency? Is that the same,
I think it's
or is it a separate
Well,
element?
You have it,
Well,
he
yeah,
has,
just to
he
say
has
the-
it in front of him.
Any adoption or amendment to a land use plan element since 2017 requires three things: smart growth, storm resiliency, and environmental sustainability.
So
They're
that's
three
parts of,
separate items, part of amending
The land
any
use.
land use
Yeah,
plan
that's what I
element.
was saying.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
In addition, Paul is correct that amending a land use plan element, not necessarily a master plan examination report, also now since 2021, requires the climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment. That's
That's
different
separate.
item.
Okay.
And just to mix it up all the more, since somewhere in 2018 or 19, we also have to show existing and proposed locations for public electric vehicle charging infrastructure in our amended land use plan elements as well. I knew there was something with electric vehicle charging of recent vintage.
Mhm.
So
So
the statute, the requirements under the land use plan element have been expanded.
So I got a question, maybe for Linda and for Paul, because you guys seem to have the most background on this. Is the master plan set up in such a way? I realize at the end of the day, there are overlaps and they have to work together, but for purposes of tackling what sounds like a pretty daunting thing, going back to 94, 07, 17, and getting up to speed with all the new requirements, is this process susceptible to sort of breaking it up into small chunks? In other words,
That's what I'm
certain
recommending, is that we
sections-
actually parse it.
right,
Yeah.
and then maybe we could form committees, two of us, three of us take on sections, and then obviously to the extent historically, we look at 17, 07, 17, and if it cross-references something that Kathy's working on or some other committee, then of course we'll have to, follow the evidence, go where it takes us. But otherwise, if
I think that makes
to
perfect
jump
sense. That's what
into
I'm
all
recommending.
of
yeah.
this kind of cold, and even though 2027 is a long ways off, but it seems overwhelming. But if there's a way to take it in
So
smaller
you
bites.
can do it that way. I know other municipalities and boards that have done it that way. There are pros and cons to doing it that way. I think to move the discussion and getting back to the homework, I think it's important if the board members not only look at the 94 forward, but also now look at the MLUL, just under the, and there's 3 required components. You got to do goals and objectives. You got to do land use element. You got to do housing. Everything else is permissive, but not required. And look at that. And then did they cite the year that the MLUL was amended to include the element? Is that in there?
Which
In the MLUL under the master plan components, right? Don't they cite that in there?
They said the year that.
That it was amended to include some of these new elements that weren't there in
that's what I'm saying.
2017.
Okay,
Yeah,
which are the 3 mandatory
2017
ones?
And 2021.
Yeah. And and there are even elements in there that I don't think are part of what we did back in 94 that have been around.
I know.
Like,
That's
do we
exactly
wanna
my
do an
point.
economic plan element, you know?
That's
I mean,
exactly
and
my
then I
point.
think we need to further discussion. We have to focus on what's most important. Look at the schedule and timing, budget considerations, all these things.
And maybe we get direction from Paul, the must-haves and the nice-to-haves, and we start with the must-haves and then.
I
Go
would
ahead,
like to say, as knowing this discussion was coming up, I went back and reread the 2017, and it was such a good exercise just to read it. There's so much information in there that is perfectly understandable as a standalone, separate from the 1994. And the things that stood out to me, there's a lot of accomplishments. There were certain questions that came up, and then there were certain sort of topic or zoning, various topics that came up. And it brought me back in my notes to June of 2019. We did an update discussion of the master plan. And if you recall, you probably remember this, we went back and looked at all the goals that have been recommended from 2017, and they were divided into short-term, medium-term, long-term,
And ongoing.
and ongoing. And I thought that was a
Yeah.
really helpful
Yeah.
discussion.
Yep.
And so, I get all the pieces have to fit together, but my experience is that just reading the 2017 as a standalone is really helpful. And I would recommend that our board members make time for
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
It's worth it.
if you haven't looked at it, the structure is basically they take the recommendations and the statements from the one before.
Yep.
And then analyze, okay, this is what was recommended then, this is what they said then. And there's a brief discussion of, all the issues around that, and then a recommendation, yes, we should continue this, this one has been done, we could drop it, this one should be looked at a different way. So it's a pretty easy format to look at, because it's all based and refers to the one before, and they can go to the one before and see what changes were made from the one before that. So it's
I mean, the only other thing I'll add, and this is just based on my own experience, that a lot of the towns that I'll, just for lack of a better word, municipalities and boards that are sort of relatively developed municipalities, not a lot of vacant developable land left, not a lot of opportunities. We're just kicking the can down the road and doing re-exams based on, it used to be 6 years, now it's 10 years. And I was like, you know what, our infrastructure's in place, the roadway networks are in place. There's no need to do anything, but I'm finding more and more of the towns, because of everything that's gone on, structural change in the economy, redevelopment has become the big thing. That even totally developed, I mean, I have Essex County municipalities that don't have much, but it's all about redevelopment. And they really want to go forward with a whole new master plan.
Yeah.
Even when I'm kind of trying to discourage them, they want to do it. And it's become more like, well, we need a new vision. We need a new vision. This is 20, 30 years old. Let's do it. But then again, that kind of begs the issue of, you got to be able to devote the time, the resources, and the funding to do it and do it right. So
one
those
of
are considerations.
Yeah, one of the questions I would ask our township committee members here is, from a funding standpoint, I know you said it's 6 figures, so that's probably at least mid 6 figures, $500,000 or $600,000.
It's not going to be that much.
But All right, so let's say it's 4.5. But anyway, my point is, if you begin to, my point is, if we parse it in some way or prioritize it in some way, and maybe we do heavy lifting over a couple of years, we can also budget that way. So it's not such a big nugget in any one particular budget year. I think that therein lies a problem, because if you're trying to come up with a big chunk of change, maybe you can't all do it in, plan year 2006 or 2026. Maybe you spend part of that money in 2025 and then finalize it in 2027. So if you parse it out that way, it's not such a painful financial exercise to come up with the money. So that's part of what's driving my thinking too, is that maybe as you do it over time,
Yeah, that's a good point.
makes it easier.
So I want to ask a question just on the sort of logistics, like from your point of view, as you do this is your work, what would be the difference between, like starting over and doing a completely new master plan versus building off of what we already have?
So if you were doing a full-blown, completely new comprehensive master plan, you'd revisit, you'd do fresh all the elements, the required and the ones you want to deal with. And that takes time and effort. You're doing circulation, you're doing infrastructure, you're doing sustainability, you're doing an economic plan element. There's a lot of, research and work and policy decisions that need to be made.
So what we do now when we do a re-exam is we look back at the categories that were brought up previously. But if we were to do a completely new plan, we would like start fresh with determining what elements we want to add or include.
You'd look at all the elements.
Well, you can put the elements in as new elements in as part of a re-exam, right?
Yes.
That's kind of what
I mean,
I'm getting at.
But it strikes me that
No,
there's,
You gotta do it separate.
oh, really?
Yeah.
You can't add a
What you
new
would do
element.
is part of the re-exam, you'd state in the re-exam, we need to do a sustainability element, and then you'd basically do that as right after, and sometimes it's part of.
Okay.
It's a separate document, but it's done at the same
But
time as the re-examination.
But it would seem to me that the only reason or a reason to do a major redo, if there's a number of substantial changes to the vision and goals. If the vision and the goals have stayed mainly the same or because there are some changes, I know I'm looking through that some of those have changed in some ways, but unless you're doing a major revision of, relook at the whole vision and goals of the whole program, then there's really no reason to do it, because many of your elements aren't going to be necessarily affected.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And one of the things that you do as part of the re-examination, that's kind of the last thing, whether you need to do a new master plan. I think it's right in the statute, the wording, Steve. That's we've always taken that to be not just new master plan, but whether you need to update the various elements of the master plan, short of a full new master plan. And we did that back in 2017. We determined that we did not need to update the circulation element or the infrastructure, and right?
Yeah, I mean, there were some updates, maybe some more projects and stuff that went into
Yeah,
it, but it
and
wasn't like a full blown.
Yeah, and there were some recommendations that may have covered infrastructure, but we felt we didn't need to do a complete update of that element at the time.
You run into a situation though where if we start doing elements now and 3 years from now, it's almost like you got to kind of revisit it.
Well,
like kind of things have changed, and that's kind of one of my fears is you. Kind of,
So we get an endless, like a mouse on a
That's
racetrack.
the downside,
Yeah.
Linda, that I didn't mention. Jim just hit it with doing it, devoting the time and doing an element at a time, is that all of a sudden, it's like if you do it over 3 years, it's like, holy moly, we did this first and there's been some changes as we adopt the sixth element of the plan.
But the changes would be smaller, right?
Yeah.
If it's
Well, one would
only
hope.
2 or 3 years have gone by, the changes to a particular element that you updated that recently aren't going to necessarily going to be that extensive.
Yeah.
I also worry about in re-examination reports, some elements of the original master plan get pretty short shrift. And the example that I mainly think of is the historic preservation
Yes.
element, which was, I think, in Part B of the 1994 master plan. And I'm not sure that it really has been updated in any substantial way, and it's very, very out of date.
We did do some work on historical.
We did as part of the 2017.
Yeah.
There were
Pretty extensive, actually.
recommendations and they were all carried out.
Yeah.
The ordinance, the demolition ordinance.
Yeah, we actually spent a
I
good
know, I
chunk
remember
of time
that.
on historic preservation in 2017.
And yet, the original 1994 master plan is still considered to be the master plan. And if you
Yeah,
go back and
correct.
read the historic preservation element, you find reference to a lot of buildings that don't exist and
Yeah,
a lot of
so-
stuff that's
So
kind of nonsensical.
Yeah.
it ends up not making sense. You're right.
The ultimate decision is up to the township committee though,
Right.
right? I mean, because they're the ones that are going to be footing the bill for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
you're looking at, probably 3 times the cost, right? I mean, 2 or 3 times the cost to go to a full-blown master plan versus re-exam.
Yeah, the re-exams are clearly 5 figures, or I've seen some that are 4 figures. I wouldn't recommend a 4-figure master plan re-examination. But when you're talking about a full-blown or serious, dealing with element updates and or new elements, you're really talking 6 figures. Not as much as 600 or 500, that in my opinion, but you're talking $100,000 to $200,000 worth of work.
Well, it sounds like there's a number of avenues. It's not just, one of the
Well,
others. So, but I
We'll
think,
let Bud and Kathy take that forward to the committee and find out.
Kathy, so I'm gonna say that the number one is that I think we all need to understand better what's there and in looking at, trying to figure out where we, at what level we think it should be attacked and done. Because you're right. We don't have these decisions. It's, these folks that do. And all we do is, we can recommend and advise them based on what we've done. So.
I want to ask or make another statement that part of where this came from in February was, there was the follow-up to the League of Municipalities Conference
Right.
where there was discussion of the importance of, revisiting and discussing your master plan. And I am wondering if we can set some time, like on a meeting like tonight where we don't have a lot of applications, if we could set some time to talk about some of the issues that came up. Like for me, when I read the master plan, sort of like an update. I mean, in 2019, we did it by short-term, medium-term, long-term revision. I mean, we could do it in other ways. From my reading, I came up with a few issues, like for example, the recommendation on parking requirements. I feel like that we're ready to revisit that one, and that could turn right into an ordinance to change the parking stall size, which would have a major benefit, I think, to this board and to the applicants. And I believe we're pretty close, ready to do that. So that's like just one example of something that came out for me of reading the recommendations in the 2017.
You may recall, Linda, that for some time after that, we would devote some time as a planning board to where we were with those implementation recommendations
Yeah.
and strategies, and then we dropped the ball.
Helpful.
And in fact, a lot of the 0 to 1 year, we did most of them, I
I
think.
know.
But then
a
it
lot
kind
them were
of
done.
fell apart. So maybe we try and devote some time on a night like this to just running through that, seeing where we are, because there are probably some things in there that we may still want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe that's another thing we should spend.
Yeah, I
some
think
time
it's kind of certainly related, but separate from the overall master
Exactly.
plan is because that's more, like you've just done tonight with
Yep.
the outdoor dining.
Yep.
The kind of things in there that are, the detailed ordinance, kind of things that,
Yep.
where we are and where we should pursue.
Yeah, and that's easy enough to do.
Because those could be brought up individually during the meeting, the meeting of the,
Do we have any major applications coming our way in the near future? So I guess we will have the luxury of some time to talk about some of this stuff. That'd be great.
required rereading.
Yes.
Is
That's
the
all.
entire,
But it is good. It's statutorily, what the chairman was describing actually is what is statutorily required in a master plan reexamination. The look back, the look now, the look forward.
Yeah.
So while it's somewhat summary informed, doesn't tell you everything that's in all the various elements, certainly it gives you an idea of, at least 5 years ago, where the board was as far as, hey, what do we need to do going forward and under, and in what time frame should we ideally do them? I say ideally because we could look back 5 years and know that in hindsight, maybe it was a little bit ideal, but only because of what came down the pipe, the last 5 years. So this is definitely a place to
You pick
start.
that up at Barnes and Noble?
Amazon,
I will sell discounted version.
It's posted on the website. I think all the versions are on there, right? I believe, of the master plan.
They are. Just a couple of questions that, like, for example, on doing the OSGU standards, we worked on that. Did we finish that? Rick and I were talking, what happened with that?
That got bogged down in my office.
We did the houses of worship.
Yeah, and we started to look at OSGU and all the different properties that are in OSGU and trying to establish some standards. And we put together some tables that just seemed to grow and grow and grow. And, it kind of came back to my lap to like, okay, let's, try to hone in on something. And that went underneath a pile on my desk. So that's out there. I think that a good thing for us to do is to go back and revisit, that whole list that, was put together about the old things before we start, going towards the new.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
is that in the
Before we
reexamination
start doing the
report?
new master plan
Oh,
for
yeah.
4 years from now, let's, it's a good way for some of the board members to kind of start seeing, hey, this is what was in the old plans. And, a lot of this stuff's been addressed and,
Right.
Yes.
some priorities have changed and stuff like that. So I think for the next, meeting that we have time, we'll redistribute this list.
Oh, okay. So that's a
Which
list
list is
based
it?
on the last
Of the
reexamination.
implementation strategies and timing that's in the master
From
plan.
2017.
The short-term, medium-term,
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
long-term.
okay.
That is so worth looking
Okay,
at.
right.
And it's been about 5 years since our
Right.
master plan reexamination report, 5 of the 10. So in essence, it's a midpoint review of
Right.
our master plan reexamination.
Making it official.
Making it official. Our
One
midpoint-
other question
Self-imposed midpoint.
that jumped out at me, there's the recommendation to change the riparian buffer zone from 75 feet to 50 feet per the change with DEP. Did we do that?
Yeah, that was done.
So we have an ordinance that did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we just had to change that number from 75 to 50 to be consistent.
Right.
And,
Did it go through the whole
99
ordinance process? I don't remember it.
I think it got rolled in with some other stuff that we did. It could have been when we changed the
Stormwater
parking spot size or something, one of those things, because it was a simple change.
We did one for the stormwater regs one.
So that
Okay.
summary, that's just the table that's in the master plan, basically? Okay, so that's our homework is I would very much like
the
everyone to look at
2017
all of the master
2017 master
plans.
plan reexamination.
Is that in tail end of that?
Yeah, it's on the
too?
website.
That's on
the website.
Is that in the,
Yeah, it comes right from there.
okay, but you may have developed this table separate.
We did.
Yeah.
It is
Is
it's separate.
that yours?
Uh-huh.
The one that's in
Yeah,
there,
I
the
think
zone
so.
summary table?
Can you share that
Yes.
with me, Jim?
Yeah, so we'll
Yes.
get that out to
So
everyone.
that's a little more.
I didn't
that's the
realize
same
I
list,
tried
but a
keeping
little
that
more
updated
extensive
for a while, and
notation.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
I would say it's a
Keep up
lot
with
more
it, so.
extensive.
Okay.
You know,
Oh, I
because
think we
that's in a
should,
Specific
I do
project.
too.
Oh, that would
I
be
think that's
great.
really
That would be
helpful.
great.
Yeah, I'm a nerd about stuff like that.
That, we were talking about the zone table, the zone summary table. I think that's really helpful.
That's right.
I think he said he's going to distribute it to all of us.
Yeah, I'm gonna send that, we'll get that out to everyone.
Okay, thank you. That would be great.
Right before the meeting, we're gonna discuss it on. It's not gonna come out
Duh.
soon. But, no, we'll get it out so people have time to look at it.
implementation there, that's.
This is right, the implementation is right out of the exam, but
But the
But that
the
spreadsheet
table,
was something else.
That was something else.
Yeah.
I don't know
think-
what table that
I think that
is.
came from Paul.
Is that
That's
the,
the last review we did that, established all those priorities.
It was
that's
2000
It was like
short-term,
project
medium-term
specific.
That was
long, because the
2017.
goals.
Yep.
Okay, so they will, okay, good. You will distribute that. That'll be great. Okay.
Yeah, it's on the website.
I
Any
think we're
other-
done. Joe Alessa's not here, so how do we break this up?
We're gonna have to wait for another 2 weeks.
Oh, wait a minute. I have to ask for public comment.
Yes.
I
Oh, they can't
I guess
comment.
not. Yeah, nobody online. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I
Motion to
move for
adjourn.
adjournment and I second that. Thank
Okay,
you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Take care, but no NBA tonight. Enjoy your night off.
Yeah, exactly. I was starting succession before it's